Welcome to Spiritual as Fuck,
Spiritual as Fuck,
a podcast where we explore everything outside of the ordinary. I'm Liz Volpe. I'm a social entrepreneur, now psychic medium, teacher and mentor, with a huge passion to inspire people to dream big and change the world.
I'm Diane Driscoll, a coach, facilitator and speaker. I'm also a psychic intuitive, learning to incorporate my spiritual gifts into my life and business.
We're here today to share real and raw spiritual stories. It's going to give you a safe space to challenge what's normal and have some serious fun along the way.
We hope you're ready to get spiritual as fuck. In this episode, we interviewed Judea Lynch, psychic intuitive, energy healer, spirit medium and sound healer on the island of Kaua'i in Hawaii. Judea is also the co-host of Spirit Speakers podcast, which is where Liz and I first stumbled across her work. Our curiosity, coupled with Judea's breadth of gifts and experience, meant that this interview explored so much from telepathy to spirits to portals and the astral plane. In this episode, we also discussed the sensitive topic of suicide. This may be triggering for those people whose lives have been touched by suicide, but I still very much recommend that you listen to the episode, as Judea's vulnerability and her courage are truly inspirational. I just suggest that you listen to it at a time and a place where you feel comfortable to allow any emotions to come up, and that you've got the support you need should you need to reach out to someone.
We're pretty excited today because we have Judea with us all the way from Hawaii, which is pretty cool. And I have to, I guess, start with my story about you, Judea, because you had such a profound, huge impact on me and my life. Thank you. Because right in the middle of these COVID lockdowns, I went through one of my giant awakenings. Before that point, now I realize that I've had a few smaller, beautiful, gentle spiritual awakenings. But in the middle of COVID, this huge thing happened to me where, in the case of a day, really, I opened up spiritually and had spirits from the other side talking to me. And I felt like I'd drunk 10 Red Bulls a day. And over 3 weeks, I couldn't sleep, eat. My husband thought I was going crazy. I thought I was going even crazier. And during that time, when I was, Googling what to do and what was happening for me, a friend said to me, there's this podcast called Spirit Speakers. You have to go and listen to this straight away. And I think I sat in my bedroom for like hours every day and binged every single podcast of yours. And I tell you what, I felt not only so at home, but you made me feel like everything was going to be okay. Honestly, and honestly, we wouldn't even probably be here recording our podcast now if it wasn't for what you and Patty and Spirit Speakers actually did. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Wow, thank you. I'm really touched by that. It wasn't an intentional thing to do the podcast to get people to listen. That's the funny thing. We were just really doing it for ourselves, of just hey, we'll have a record of all of our wild stories and our conversations for our children and our children's children, even if nobody even listened to it. So it kind of blows my mind a little bit that people resonated with it so much and got so much from it, and it's been helping them. Because sometimes when I'm hearing people say, oh, I binged every episode, part of me is like, oh my gosh, what did I even say? Like, I can't remember. Like, once we've recorded the episode and I've just moved on, I'm really needing to go back and listen to some of those old episodes and recall what kind of insights that I was handing out. But I honestly, I don't remember. But thank you so much for taking it to heart and listening and like letting it inspire you to start your own podcast.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
Going through a spiritual awakening is there's so many different, I guess, experiences with that. And I think really that's where we should start with you, because I know from you being quite young, you had different experiences happen, and then you had a big spiritual awakening. But tell us a little bit about you growing up. Like, how did this all start to happen for you?
Oh gosh. It's funny because when I was younger, I didn't think that I had gifts. I could barely even accept that I was just strange. I was weird. But I also remember always convincing myself that everybody else was kind of experiencing the world the same way as me. Like I would see things all the time, but I thought that was like a physical malfunction of my eyeball, like thinking like, oh, we're all seeing these like orbs and things floating all over the place, and we can all see wispy colors around everyone, and we all think that we see people walking by that aren't there. Like I thought that was just normal. And I was certainly interested in the paranormal, like aliens and ghosts and telepathy and telekinesis and all these things that I would hear about when I was younger. But I honestly didn't think it was real. I was just like, oh, that's like some interesting, obscure topic that people talk about once in a while. But I really didn't believe. I wasn't like, oh, I know it's real. I know it's true. Um, it wasn't until I had my very big, massive spiritual awakening and the reality that hit me so hard that it was all real was shocking to me. And I think really the first one was when I discovered telepathy, that I could read
Okay.
other people's thoughts and other people could hear my thoughts, and that it was validated almost immediately once it started happening. And if that could be real, then everything else could be real. I remember thinking that, like, if this is real, anything's possible. And once I realized that, I suddenly realized I was always psychic or clairvoyant or had these gifts, or these things were presenting themselves to me my whole life. I had just been conditioned to write it off immediately. And so once I changed my perspective and started kind of taking a moment to observe the things that were happening with a little bit more detail, I realized that there was a lot of phenomenon happening around me, and it's happening to everybody. It's just a matter of like whether or not they're paying attention. So it's not something new that suddenly unfolds. It's always there. It's like, are you looking at it or not? That was how I saw it.
Wow. Let's talk about telepathy.
Start
Is that
there.
just like one moment where suddenly, you could hear somebody? Tell us
Mm-hmm.
about that.
Well, there was this young woman. Um, I don't know. She was this young lady that I met. We had seen each other around a few times and had, just said hi here and there. She was traveling with a group of friends. I was traveling with a group of friends. And this one day we were talking face to face. We were just talking out loud about like, oh my gosh, isn't this world just so magical? Like, have you figured out how to manifest things? It was like right when all that stuff was opening up, manifestation so amazing, and telling her the story about how I was manifesting things, and she's talking back to me and we're all excited, and next thing we know our foreheads are touching, like we're just kind of gravitating towards each
Oh,
other and our
wow.
foreheads touch each other, and we continue the conversation from our heads, and the conversation escalates. I was very young, so this was a long time ago. I can't remember the exact details of the conversation, but I do remember that the conversation had escalated into knowing that we were here to save the world.
Oh,
And then I remember hugging her telepathically. Okay. So this was like even a whole new concept of like, whoa, you can hug somebody telepathically. And she hugged me. And then we peeled away and we looked at each other and we were both just like, did we just do that? Did you just hear me? I asked her. And she said, yes, I just heard you in my head too. And that was the defining moment that both of us realized that telepathy was real. And then after that, that's when everything had turned on and my whole kundalini, like my big wild awakening happened. I think that's what initiated it. It kind of like cracked me open. And then after that, I could hear everybody that I was around. I could think about somebody, I could hear their thoughts. I could think about somebody that was in close proximity to me. I could think about people thousands of miles away. I could think about people I haven't talked to in years. And I could swear I could hear their thought process. And very quickly, though, I realized that most people aren't thinking positive things. And there was a lot of
Mm.
negativity and a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear and a lot of judgment and a lot of all these kind of icky, sticky things And it was almost immediately debilitating. Like it was very exciting for the first day. And then after that, it went into like, shut up. Like it was driving me crazy. And so I can see how people with mental illness, who I think have very open abilities without any guidance or control, could kind of spiral down into a very dark place with having very open gifts like that. So it was turned into a lot of chatter and a lot of negativity and a lot of noise. And then it was noise on top of noise on top of noise. And I remember getting very depleted and very mentally exhausted and tired. And then I remember being able to shut it off. And one of the ways that I learned to shut it off was amongst my group of friends, I could hear everybody's thoughts. I could tell you what they were thinking, what was going on, with the exception of this one woman. Her name was Arturi. She was a young, beautiful lady, and she was actually a horse whisperer, which at the time I didn't understand. Yeah, so she would travel around and go to horse farms and train their horses in a matter of days, like very difficult horses, because she would have the ability to talk to them and train them. And I was 18, 19 at the time. And I just thought that was like the wildest thing. Like, oh, that's cool, I guess. I don't know. But how do you do it? Like, I just couldn't understand it. You know, she was a spiritually advanced woman, which was something I didn't get. And one day I went up to her and I said, you know, what's really weird is like, I can hear everybody's thoughts but yours. Like every time I think of you, or every time I tap in with you, it's like hitting a wall. It's like dead silent. There's nothing. And she smiled and she absolutely understood what I was talking about. And she's like, yeah, you know, well, I just closed the door. And I was like, close the door? Like, what door are you talking about? And she's like, you know, there's just like a little door in your mind and you just close it.
Wow.
And it was this concept at the time that I thought seemed so ridiculous. I was like, a door in my head? That makes no sense. And this goes on for another few days. And I had hit the wall. And I was like, I'm crazy town. Somebody needs to take me to a hospital. I can't do this anymore. It was all negative. I couldn't sleep. And it was just noise, 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 noise. And I was crying. I've probably told the story on the podcast or not. Otherwise, every time I'm about to tell one of these stories, I'm like, this sounds so crazy. I sound so crazy.
Not to us.
We all do. You're in good company.
I was crying and I was having that moment where I was like, I'm done. I can't do this. My friends were worried about me. I was just having a real mental break. And my friend, she was an older woman. She was about 10 years older than me, also had a lot of spiritual gifts. See, I was with the right people at the time, but she saw me crying and I was sobbing, and she just kind of scooped me up in her arms, and I was like cradled in her lap, and she's like caressing my hair, and she's just trying to console me. And she doesn't know why I'm crying. She's like, it's okay, whatever's going on, it's okay, you're going to be fine. And then all of a sudden she stops talking to me and she starts talking to somebody else who's not there. And we're by ourselves. There's nobody else around. And she's like, yes, no, she's okay. No, I'm with her. I don't think you're ready for this. You know, and so listening to her talk to somebody that's not me, it made me stop crying. And so I looked up at her and I was like, who are you talking to? And she looks at me and she's like, your Uncle David. Now, what I hadn't told anybody was during this whole kind of like what I thought was a psychotic break and me hearing all these voices, I was having these very long, drawn out conversations with my schizophrenic uncle, David, who lived in New York at the time, and I was in the Midwest. And this was also what was kind of perpetuating this idea that I was crazy, because I was having these telepathic conversations with, at the time, I didn't understand how I could do that with somebody who was thousands of miles away and somebody that I hardly ever talked to in my life. And then on top of it, that they have a mental illness. How do I explain? How do I explain that? And so I was very frightened at the idea that this was happening, but also very comforted because I had somebody to talk to.
Mm.
And it kind of helped me drown out all the other noise that I was hearing from everybody else's thoughts. Um, so for, I would say, probably a solid week, I was having this conversation with my uncle, and we were just checking in, and I felt really bad for him. And I was telling him all the time, telepathically, like, you're not crazy. I'm so sorry. You had profound gifts and nobody understood. And like, I was just trying to be a friend to him in this like telepathic reality that I was having. But I told nobody that that was happening. And not only that, that my friend who told me that she was talking to my Uncle David, I didn't call my Uncle David David, or Dave. I called him Uncle David my whole life, Uncle David. And so for her to say it, Uncle David, like that. And when she said that, it felt like I had a garbage sack full of bricks just sitting on me. And then it just lifted off instantly because I was sitting there crying about how crazy I thought I was, and that I was trying to muster up the courage to tell them to take me somewhere because I needed help. But when she said that, it kind of erased any doubt that I had in that moment, at least enough for me to go another day, to make another day of like, it's like, okay, wait, there must be something to this. Maybe I really am talking to my Uncle David and I'm not crazy. And it kind of gave me a breath of air for this moment. And I remember later that night, we were driving somewhere and it was nighttime, and I was listening to all the noise and I could hear everybody's thoughts. And I started thinking about what Aturi had told me, and that there's this door in my mind and to close it. And I was pondering it, not really understanding. And then I kind of accidentally just imagined that there was a door in my head. It's like, does she mean that there's a door? And I'm imagining that there's this door, and that I just close it. And I remember thinking, I close it, and I heard a whoosh, whoop, like a slam of a door, and my head popped right in the center where my pineal gland is. And it was like taking this huge deep breath, like, like I was drowning, and everything was crystal clear and quiet.
Wow.
Oh,
and that's how it shut off. And I remember I was like in the car with a few other people. We were driving, and I'm like trying to listen. I'm trying to hear what they're thinking because I've been hearing them, and nothing. It was dead silent. And I had energy, and I felt like I was sitting up straight, and everything looked clear. Like the tiredness, that deep depleting tiredness, went away instantly. And I just felt so relieved. And about 5 minutes after that, I was like, oh no, what if I can't turn it back on? Then I got scared that I wasn't ever going to get it back. And from there, it was like this slow journey of like learning how to control it and turn it on and off, which took many years, because after that point, it was like going to turn on when it wanted to, turn off when it wanted to. And it was like a bit of finessing over the years and practice to learn how to turn it on or off whenever I wanted.
That is such a gift what you have. Like there's so much in what you've just said to unpack. But I think the gift, like, because for me, what really resonates is my mental health journey, which turned into a spiritual journey. So, I think anyone who's on a spiritual journey of any description goes through those moments of feeling like they are crazy. But then for others of us, it's like, for me, it was a long-term mental illness, various illnesses, and then realizing, oh no, once you stop looking at yourself as being crazy and open up that there's so much more that it could be. Like I'm not saying to anybody stop your medication or to think that, oh, it's all spiritual in nature, but it does give you, there's so much comfort for anyone listening to think, it could be something else. Or if I have a connection, if I'm having this telepathy, if I'm seeing these spirits, that, there is something else. And, you're here to tell the tale about that. I think also the gift that you're giving everyone is that, yes, there is a possibility of being able to open the door, close the door, and then find the ways of fine tuning that, which I know Liz has shared with us as well in previous podcasts with her own gifts too. is there, because this is something you've refined now over the years, if you were to share a pearl of wisdom right now on that specific ability, is there anything that you would encourage our listeners to say, okay, if you're struggling with that fine tuning or being able to turn off your gifts, how would you describe that today, bringing all of your wisdom to bear?
I mean, I do think that there's something with having a tangible reference to tap into, like opening or closing a door. And I don't think it necessarily has to be that. It could be it could be anything symbolic of you just setting the intention that something is open and on or off. I think that's important. But there's a lot of different layers as to how this works too, because when you're open up to so many different dimensional planes, we're dealing with higher and lower vibrational energies, and there's tricky energies in those lower fields. And this is why a lot of people go crazy, and why, well, I'm supposed to trust my intuition. I'm supposed to trust my gifts and these insights that are coming in, but not all the information coming in is really for your greater good or the other people's greater good. Some of them want to manipulate you. Okay. And so with that, there was a lot of journeying in my spiritual growth of like learning how to reinforce my protection and my boundaries and my guide systems, and raising my frequency. Just the simple act of knowing how to vibrationally pull my field up so that I know that I'm in contact or know I'm in connection with higher vibratory fields, like that in itself is probably a very important part of the process too. And we do that through doing and practicing high vibrational things like meditation and the way we eat and the music we listen to and the content that we take in and the people we surround ourselves with. So it's a multifaceted avenue of like how we do this. There's no one and done. It's like we have to work from every angle, and we have to do our like due diligence and making sure that we are keeping everything tight and right and clean and high at every angle. And we don't want any leaks in that container, because like once we have a break, that's when we're susceptible to these like tricky lower vibrational things that come in, and that will like misguide us and misalign us with the truth that we're supposed to be seeing, and that can make things more difficult for us. So I wish I could say that it's super easy, but in the same way it kind of is, as long as you have awareness of that we live in an energetic universe and everything is moving and operating according to a vibration. And if we understand that and we have some tools to keep us in alignment with the higher vibrations, then we'll be okay. And it makes controlling the gateway between our clairvoyant abilities, our mediumship, all these things that are happening a lot easier. Because if we're operating very open on the lower fields, man, it's I've been there, and I witness other people going through it. It's very challenging. So, but then I don't know, but then I'm different than some people. Some people just naturally operate on a higher frequency, and they don't know, they can't even dip into those lower spaces. It's not even part of their like matrix. It's not part of their makeup. So I don't want to say that to spook everybody out, but like I also want some sober awareness here that like you have to keep the vibes high if you're going to be meddling in this work, or if you're going to be in that practice. It's not just about opening and closing a door. It's not just about calling in guides. It's about your whole daily life practice has to be in alignment, and working from a place of integrity and high intention.
Yeah, I think intention. I know that I listened to, like Liz had mentioned about listening to your podcast. Of course, when I discovered it through Liz, went back to the early stages, and I in preparation for this was trying to find this one particular episode that had a huge impact on me, which I think was looking at the difference of where you operate. So for some people, they're a little bit more I guess comfortable, for want of a better word, of dealing with some of those heavier heavier or more dense energies, whereas for other people, they don't even experience that at all. So I totally resonate with it. Yes, that different people will experience this in different ways. It doesn't mean that the spectrum of what's out there isn't, like we can all tap into the various parts of it, but keeping our intention as high as possible, keeping our practices as high vibration as possible, they're the things that will always stand to you. But again, knowing that at any point in time that you still have the power to be able to close that channel or to shut that off, and just having confidence in your own power to be able to do that, I think will be very comforting to a lot of people listening to the podcast.
Yeah, I think that's the I think that's the big secret, honestly, is just how do we keep the vibes as high as possible, and everything and anything you can do from every angle to make sure that is happening, and recognizing in the areas in your life where that's not in alignment and how to move those things out, whether it's like the people or the situation or the things that are dragging your energy down, unhappy job, unhappy relationship, like all of these factors are pulling your energy down. And if you want to get very skilled and you want to have a lot of control and you want to feel very safe in your abilities, that's like the trick. That's the secret. Keep everything as high as possible.
It's such an interesting conversation for me, because when I went through that spiritual awakening, I had so much fear. Like, I'm scared of ghosts from being young. And I remember like literally setting these rules with whatever was around me, like, just don't bring anything scary. If anything, just bring the nice people through. But and I've played around with, raising the vibration. And there's been times actually that for like days on end, and like 3-4 days, I felt so tired, low, can't stop crying. And there's been no explanation, if I look on my external existence and life, on why I should be feeling that. What would you put that down to?
Well, you have to. I mean, no one's going to just come out the gate just figuring it all out perfectly. Like, your soul needs to experience both ends of the spectrum to some level. Maybe, maybe you're not conversing with demons. Okay. Maybe it's not everybody's going to be doing that, but you have to experience the low side to understand the high side of things. And you got to understand how to do things the wrong way in order to learn how to do them the right way. And we can do our very best to navigate things to kind of bypass a lot of the grief that we might experience by listening to other teachers or elders or people who understand. But in some level, there's no way around it. You kind of have to experience.
Yeah, so true.
Some of the shadow stuff in order to get it, how it works.
We got to go through it.
Yeah, that's it. Got to go through it.
Exactly.
But I love though, because if you, in your sad moments, like, it was 3 days.
Yeah.
That's not so bad.
Yeah.
When I went through it, some of them were like years long, where it took me years to pull myself out of something. And then when I snapped out of it with that clarity, like, my God, this thing has had me for a couple of years, and so that's part of my purpose in doing the podcast. If I can save you a couple years,
saved me.
Yeah,
it's that catalyst, absolutely.
Yeah.
You're quickening us all through it. Can I ask? So, what has fascinated me, and again, I think both Liz and I have been in awe of your journey, your gifts, your experiences. So it was very difficult to prepare for this podcast for us, because it was like, there are so many things that we'd like to ask. But can you share with us the breadth of your experiences with spirit as it is today? So, through the work that you do, the realms that you engage with, or the dimensions that you engage with, is there a way that you can, I'm asking you to summarize something here, which is huge, but just to give us a flavor of what that, the 3D plus multidimensional existence that you live in.
Okay. Wow, what a great question. I take for granted my own reality a lot of times. Like,
yes,
it's so normal to me, the way that I see things and the way I operate, that I forget that the rest of the world is not seeing things the same way as me. So how can I say it? There's like 2 realities that I'm always aware of. that are always happening. So there's this physical dimension, and then there's this, it's like an infinite space. And there's all these spirits and beings, some that I'm familiar with, some that I don't know, some that are, let's just call it the astral plane. Astral plane that exists, that encompasses all things metaphysical and spirit. And I have awareness always that these two realities are kind of imposed on top of each other. And I can choose to engage with it or not. You know, sometimes I put my focus in this physical reality, or sometimes I open up to putting my lens towards that astral metaphysical reality. I explain it to people sort of like if you held two different pictures in front of each eyeball, and you tried to look at two different pictures at the same time, and you know how you can kind of still see both of them, but they're kind of holographically imprinted on top of each other. But like you could close one eye and focus on one side, and close the other eye and focus on the other side, or look at both of them at the same time. That's kind of how my reality looks to me all the time. And in that, there are layers of beings. I'm actually describing this to you in real time because I've never tried to break this down before, but
I love this. This is why we ask these questions. We want to know the details of what and how you experience it.
Well, as I'm experiencing it now, there's my spirit guides who are very close to me. So imagine like we're all sitting in a room in close proximity with each other, and they're all right there. They're at my disposal. I could reach out, I could grab them, I can call upon them. They're always there. They're always listening intently, and they're ready for me at any point to give them direction or ask them something. And then behind that, there's like this awareness of these other beings and spirits back there that are not directly related to me, but they might be attached to the land or the building or these people, you know, and I choose not to engage. I'm aware that they're all there, but I have a life to live. I'm not trying to engage with every single little thing that I have awareness of. But if a client comes in, some of them will step forward, and that's when the invitation is open. So I know that, you know, well, I'm sitting with somebody, the gateway's open for those that are, that it's appropriate to come and speak on behalf of this person, then that's open. So there's sort of like that always happening. And then within people, okay, so people are encoded with like a lot of information because you're these like infinite souls that have lived for ever and ever, and you've incarnated through different dimensions and planets and who knows how many earthly lives. And so there's all this encoding in your field, and I can choose to look at it or not. I can bend my lens where I'm like, you just look like a regular old person, which is what I tend to do diligently all the time. Like I do not want to look at anybody's stuff. But if you and I were here and we're chatting, and maybe like I'm a little bit more comfortable, so I'll soften it a little bit, and while we're talking, I'll allow some of that information to come through. Maybe for my own understanding of you, or maybe because spirit is nudging me that maybe there's some insight that I should tell you, or you know, maybe it's just even for my own protection, just to make sure that the person that I'm dealing with is somebody that I, you know, want to be engaged with more or not. So yeah, I guess that's the way I'm going to say it. It's almost like there's another reality on top of this other reality, and I'm aware that it's always there. I just choose whether or not I want to pay attention to it.
Wow.
It's interesting. I just did these retreats in Costa Rica, and I had a group of women come, and we were all hanging out. And the Costa Rica is like alive. It is so rich with life and energy and spirits and all these things. And I was watching all these women be like, oh my gosh, did you see that? Oh, there was this over here. And, you know, they're picking up all this information about, oh, and then this person walked in and I saw this. And I was like looking at them like, wow, like part of me felt like for a second, I was like, wow, these ladies are really psychic. They're like more psychic than me. And then actually what I realized was like, no, I just choose to have a ton of control. Like, I don't want to pick up everybody's information. I don't want to see all the dead people around us right now. I don't want to pick up the energies of the land. I'm just trying to like enjoy this bonfire and have a nice conversation with y'all.
Yeah, enjoy the 3D elements as well.
Yeah. But it was sort of eye-opening to me, how much control and how almost
Mm.
stubborn I am about like not wanting to use it, and any moments that it's not necessary for me to use it, because it's exhausting, it's taxing, and it makes me like out of my head, and it makes it hard to function in the
Oh, yeah.
3D.
Wow. You've just reminded me of one of my favorite stories that you shared. And I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this correctly, but could you share your incredible story of being on the beach? Is it called Polihale?
Polihale.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, hale. Um, well, what do you want to know?
I-
There's a story around that story that
mm,
is crazy. And I'll share it with you. I've never shared it, but it's a wild story around a story. So how did this all even happen? I had ended up on Kauai. I had a really terrible series of events, and I legitimately was going to kill myself.
wow.
That's the truth. I was going
Wow.
to do it. It was the one and only time that I would have. I'll spare you the gruesome details, but my friend had just moved to Kauai, and she didn't have much money, and she knew that I was suffering,
Mm,
and she sent me a plane ticket that left in a couple hours.
wow.
And she said, "Get on the plane." And I was so feeling so low. I was like, "Oh, I can't bear the guilt of like, she doesn't have any money and she bought me this ticket. I had nowhere to go. I had no money. I had no possessions. I lost everything." And I got on the plane and I landed on Kauai, and I like cried for like a month. And my neighbor, she said, "Hey, they're hiring at this restaurant. Uh, why don't you go apply, and then you can make some money and get off of the island?" And I was like, "Yes, I'm ready." Like, so I go, they hire me right then. I start my first night of work, waitressing, new restaurant. I don't know the menu, nothing. It's a table that's not even my table. There's these two gentlemen sitting at this table, and they say,
Mm.
"Hey, do you need another job?" And I was like, "Yes, I do need another job." Because all I'm thinking is, I want to make as much money as possible, and I want to get off of the island. I need to go somewhere and start my life over. And so they give me this address, and they said, "Meet me tomorrow, 3 o'clock, la da 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 da, down some road on the North Shore that I don't know." So borrow my friend's car. Next day I go down this road. I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I'm meeting two strange men on some back
Yeah.
road in Kilauea. Like, this is insanity. And I was like, "Oh, you're so foolish. It wasn't even your table. Like, you're so, naive." Anyways, the guys show up. They lead me behind this very fancy gated numbered gate, and then through this beautiful landscaped property and past another beautiful gate.
Mm,
And we end up at this, at the time it was a $14 million estate, which is probably
wow.
worth a lot more now. Infinity pool, like most gorgeous view on Kauai. Like, I'm telling you, it was insane. It was
Wow.
I'd never seen money like that. I'd never seen a
Yeah,
place like that.
yeah.
They hire me on the spot, and they say, "Hey, you get to live here. You just got to like keep that pool clean, water these plants. And when the boss comes, just make sure that the boss is taken care of." The boss is this billionaire that lives somewhere else. I'm not going to disclose too much information, but lives somewhere else. And he comes here on his fancy vacations once in a while, and he needs somebody to run errands for him and this and that. And I was like, "Okay, sounds great." Boom.
Wow.
Next thing you
Wow,
know,
exactly.
yeah, like literally boom, boom, boom. I'm just, from my first day of like coming out of a crying spell to sudden, like lit in a matter of like 48 hours, I'm like on one of the best properties on the North Shore. And the long and the short of this story is that man ended up not being a really great man.
Mm,
And he did some inappropriate things. And I ended up having to um, have a confrontation with him in front of others to get him to admit like what he had done. And I was left once again with nothing. This is like months after the fact, nowhere to go, no money, nothing. And it had nothing to do with anything that I did. It was because this man was being inappropriate to me and made me very uncomfortable. And anyways, I had to sign a piece of paper that said I would never mention his name, and the whole deal.
Yeah.
And he writes me a check for like a good amount of money. Okay. So now I'm like months after, right? I'm like, had landed on Kauai with nothing. Now I have nothing again. And I'm sitting in a parking lot with this big fat check. And by the way, it was New Year's Eve, because what happened on Christmas, and then we had the meeting on New Year's Eve. So it was New Year's Eve of that year, and I'm holding this check in the parking lot, and I have nowhere to go, and the sun is going down, but I don't care because now I can start my life over. And I get a phone call, and it's this guy who I just met, and he said, "Hey, we're all camping out at this beach on the west side. This is when this happened, on New Year's Eve." And that's when I took the road. He said, "Go to the west side, go to the end of the road." He picked me up in his truck. This was like back in the days when there was no road to get out there. You needed a big lifted truck. I get out there, I land on the beach, stars. I have no idea where I am. I don't even know who this guy is really, or these people that he's out there with. And I remember having like a panic attack as soon as I landed. And I told him, "Look, I'm gonna step away from you, and I'll be back. Don't worry about me, And so I went off and I sat at the beach by myself, and they were all at the campground. There's like a park pavilions, and they were all barbecuing and making food and all of that. And that's when I saw the spirit show up. This young man, and he's telling me like, "These are my friends, all these new people that I don't know that are sitting over there." He's like, "They're my friends, and they can't see me like you. Like, can you help me?" And I was like, "Get away from me," because I had just, I was like, I wrote off all spirituality at that point.
Wow.
I was like, I was just trying not to kill myself every day. I just had this crazy thing happened with this rich man, and then I just didn't know what. I was just trying to piece my life back together, and I certainly didn't want to talk to people that nobody else could see. Like I was teetering, okay? I was teetering on the edge. Point. Yes, I was barely making it at this point. And I remember I got up and walked away from him, and then he followed me, and then he started poking me with his finger. And it felt as physical as somebody touching me. But also what was strange was that he was a full body apparition. Like I could see him from head to toe. He was an apparition. I couldn't see through him. But he was still made out of energy. I could still aurically see like the death on him. And he looked like he was about my age. And I remember being like really annoyed. I almost feel bad even saying it like this, but I was like, what do you want? Like, I see you, like, okay, like you're there. Like, what do you want? I was being rude really to him. And I could feel his sadness. And then I realized he genuinely was really sad. And those were really his friends. And that I was being rude and I was being inconsiderate. And then I said, "Look, dude, you're dead." That's exactly what I said. It's like, "Dude, you're dead. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I guess there's this place." I said, I wasn't even certain, but I said, "I'm pretty sure there's this place you can go. It's back with God. It's like home." And I was like, "And from what I understand about this place, there's no time that exists there. So if you go there, it'll be like a snap of a finger, blink of an eye, and you'll be with your friends again." And I remember his face kind of like contemplating what I had said, and I could see this sort of light bulb go off, and he was like, "That makes sense." And then I saw him shrink down into this orb about the size of like a volleyball. And then it blinked off. He blinked off and went into the sky in these like rainbow colors. And I knew that he had crossed over. And at that point, I had never been able to get a spirit to cross over. I had seen dead people tons of times. I've tried. I was like stupid things from the movies, go to the light, just ridiculousness. I wish you could see some of the spirits that the way they reacted. Like some of them literally scowled, like a vampire, like like didn't like it. Some of them laughed at me, and some of them just like were like like mocking me, like because it was so stupid. And I got it. I realized it because I was being disingenuous too. I didn't
Yeah.
even know what I was doing, and I didn't even know if there was a way to cross spirits over. You know, I just assumed so because that's what I saw on TV, right? And but I knew that I had crossed this guy over. I knew that I did. I just felt it. And right when I was about to be like, "Oh, you did it! Wow, you finally crossed one over," and I understood the reason I was able to is because I talked to him like a normal guy, like not like he was some
Yeah.
mystical being. Like it was just like, "Hey, man, that's what's up. You're dead."
Matter of fact.
Just matter of fact, because that's what spirits are. They're regular everyday people. Like they're not these mystical beings like the way that we want to project them, our thoughts of what they are. But anyways, and then suddenly there was another one and another one and another one, and like boom, I was like surrounded by 4 or 5 different dead people. And they had this incredible negativity about them, and I thought that they were violent, and I thought that they were going to hurt me, and I thought, but I don't think that they really were. I just think that maybe that one guy had the tendency to be aggressive in life, and this guy maybe was a little bit of a pervert, or this one was like a little bit of a jerk, and so I was picking that energy up from them because they weren't pure, clean beings, but it doesn't mean that they were terrible either. It's just the thing that I always try to explain about earthbound spirits. They're carrying a lot of heaviness. It's not that they're scary or bad or malicious or ill-intended. They just carry a heaviness about them, and that can be kind of spooky and uncomfortable to perceive. But anyways, I was sitting there and I thought, wow, this is crazy. I'm really uncomfortable, and I was like really scared. And then all of a sudden somebody knocked into me because I was squatting on the beach at this point, and somebody ran into me, knocked me forward, and I thought it was a living person, but it wasn't, because I looked up and I saw this really tall white man with glasses. I remember his hair, I remember everything. And he starts just yelling at me like, "What are you doing here? You're in my way. Get out of my way." And I was like, what is going on? I'd never been anywhere where spirits were so solid like that they felt physical, and nor have I ever seen spirits that looked head to toe like clear. Like usually it was like a piece of them or a wisp of them or an awareness, of them being there. But anyways, I stood up, and I remember being so scared. I was like, I'm going to run. I need to run. I need to get out of here. But when I stood up, I realized I was standing in a sea of them, that it wasn't just these ones that were right in front of me. I was literally in a crowd of hundreds, if not thousands of them. And when I looked up to the mountain, which was kind of flanking the beach, I saw them coming out of this like point over one of the mountain peaks. And they were like coming out of nowhere and then cascading down, and they were landing on the beach where I was standing, and then they were cascading out over the ocean to the point in the mountain at the end of the beach that you'd have to like go around to get to the Nepali coast. Okay, but at the time I didn't know the geography of the island or anything. It was just like, okay, they're going out over there and disappearing. And I started shaking uncontrollably, and I remember I couldn't run. I was petrified. I was paralyzed. I was just paralyzed in total fear. And I remember thinking, "Oh my God, I'm in some sort of like Hawaiian hell where all the bad spirits go, and there's no escaping this. There's nowhere to run, and they're all negative, and they're all terrible, and all these things." And so they start, and I'm noticing all of them because they're all walking from point A to point B, but they're not carrying anything. They're not looking any direction. They're sort of like almost zombie-like, just staring off into nothingness and just walking, like instinctually walking from point A to point B. It was only the ones that were walking directly by me that would sort of snap out of their trance walk, and then they would pause and they would look at me, and then they would paw me and touch me, and kind of out of curiosity, like I startled them, like Like they were like, oh, what is she doing here? And I'd be like, oh, what are you doing here? Like, I don't know what's going on. And and I met so many of them. I've tried over the years to remember all the ones, but I mean, there was a good, at least a half dozen or more spirits that I spoke to, probably more like 10 or 12, but each one was like a different personality, different age. I know how they died. One of them distinctly was this, like, I would say middle-aged, maybe in his 40s. He was like a rancher, because he had the cowboy hat and everything, mustache, like literally. And I saw shots when he was walking by me. I could see the landscape of his ranch, and that there was like cows and horses.
Wow.
And but he was just aggressive. He was just a jerk. You could just tell he had that chip on his shoulder, and he was just that kind of guy to everybody. And like he was the big guy, and he was, the boss man and all of that. And I didn't really appreciate his energy too much, but he came by. I remember there was this young Asian man. He looked like he was probably 20. And I could hear club music playing, and he was like bobbing and dancing, and he was like very flamboyant. He was gay, and sassy. And he was, as he was walking by, like, oh, who are you? Like, who do you think you are? And like giving me all this attitude. And I thought it was entertaining, but it was also like kind of annoying too. And I knew that he had died on a drug overdose at this party that he was at, and I knew the rancher had died of a sudden heart attack. And there was another man, he was overweight, and I could see him on his like lazy boy, watching TV all day long and just eating junk food and soda, and just, I saw him just wasting years and years and years until he basically just died sitting there watching TV, didn't take care of himself, just lazy, and just unmotivated, just that kind of, I hate to sound like I'm being so judgmental, but like I felt it and I saw it. And anyway, so there was all these people that were going by, and there was this like negativity on everybody. And this is why I thought I was in some place that all these bad souls must have gone to. And then suddenly I saw this family, and it was the only time that I remember seeing and people walking not by themselves. And it was a man and a woman. It was an older boy, maybe a teenage boy, and a small child that was being held, that might have been like 2-3 years old. And they were African, and they had African fabrics wrapped around them, just like in the classic way you would see with the turban and the whole deal and the bright fabrics. And I could see them all slowly walking towards me with huge smiles on their face. Like they were just beaming, like they were so excited to see me. And they looked beautiful, and I remember looking at them because they stuck out to the whole crowd of all these people, and there they were, just this family staring at me, slowly walking towards me. And they had this like sweetness about them, this kindness. I could tell they were really good. And not only that, but they were projecting this energy of being so happy to see me, which was such like a flip from all this craziness that I was seeing. And I remember I wanted to like grab onto them, like almost in a way, like I didn't physically grab onto them, but it almost felt like I was just like, oh, save me. Like, oh, you're the only good people here. And as they were getting closer, I could smell the smoke, and I could see like the char on the fabric appearing on their clothes. That's the other thing too. It's not like they looked fully dead. It's interesting because I'm just going to make this point here because it's very interesting about people who've passed. When people die, they don't necessarily know exactly what happened to them. Like in their perception, they're still this like whole human being. And let's just say like they lost a limb in their death. And maybe when they left their body for a split second, they caught a vision of themselves and the missing limb. So when they're showing themselves to me as a spirit, it's not like they're walking up to me with a missing limb. They look like their whole selves. And then every once in a while I'll see like, oh, the limb is missing, the limb is missing, because I can tell their consciousness is processing this sense that their limb had been taken, but it's almost like they can't accept that that's what's happened because they still think they're this whole bodied being, right? So it was the same thing with this family. It wasn't like they looked all charred and burnt, but there was like moments where this wave of like that charred burntness and that smell, because I think that they were processing the trauma that they had all collectively just gone through. And it was a
Wow.
family that died in a fire, you
Wow.
know, and that they were all burned, you know.
Mm.
So it wasn't like they looked all mangled like that, but there was like moments, it was like just enough for me to see that I understood what was going on. And so that's what seeing dead people is like. But moving on, I I grabbed onto them. Oh my gosh, are you here to save me? You know, and they're just kind of laughing at me like, no, like we're here walking like everybody else, you know. And it's not like they said it in English. It was a telepathic communication. Um, and when they said that, that was the moment that I calmed down for a second. And I started like looking around and I was like, I really looked at everybody and I was like, oh, there's old people, young people, there's women, men, children, black, Asian, brown, you know, every color of the rainbow. There was everybody, gay people, straight people. I was like, that murderers next to totally really good, amazing people. And it didn't matter. Didn't matter. They
Mm.
were all walking next to each other. There was no discrimination between anybody. They were all just simply walking from one point to the other. And I knew when I had looked that I understood that I was seeing this point in which souls were leaving their physical lives and they were still carrying the baggage of their lives with them. They're still carrying all the energy load, you know, the code of all of their actions with them. And I knew that where they were going out over the ocean, that they were going to be relieved of that heaviness that they were
Wow.
carrying. And I became overwhelmed with emotions. I remember actually when that was happening, I swear to God, I could hear whales in the ocean because this was right on the beach. And you know, the whales are like,
Yes.
like,
Mm.
but
Yeah.
it sounded to me like a mother wailing for her
Wow.
lost,
Mournful.
yeah, like a mournful, like a mother losing a newborn child, like such an innocent, pure little
Wow.
being, you know. And it was just this grieving, this wailing. And I remember I started crying and I started praying and I got down into the sand. I buried my head in the sand and I just started praying for forgiveness and for to be relieved of
Mm.
the same that these people were being relieved of, like whatever I was carrying, you know, and all these choices that had led me down this like very dark road of not even wanting to live, like all these things that I was going through and all the choices that I made that got me into that place. I was praying to be relieved of it. And I don't know, it was like sometime later, not very long later, my friend who had invited me out there was tapping me on the shoulder. And I look up and he's like, hey, the food's done.
Oh, oh
Back
gosh.
to reality.
I swear. He's like, there's food now if you're hungry. I don't know how much time had passed. It hadn't been that long. Maybe, I don't know. That whole thing took maybe like a half hour.
Mm.
And I look up, I'm looking around, I'm like, there's nothing. It was like it didn't even happen. And
Mm.
and so I just get up and I'm kind of stunned and he brings me back there and he like, you know, he goes and gets me a plate of food and I sit down and his friends are all there. They're all laughing, joking around. I don't know anybody, anything. And one of them's like, so what do you think of the beach? And I was like, well, I want friends, so I don't know if I should say anything, you know. And but I did. I told them everything that happened. It just I couldn't not say it. And they
Mm.
were all just stunned. All their jaws were open. They're looking at me and I was like, "Do you guys think I'm crazy?" And the one local guy was like, he's like, "No, sister, you know where you're at." He's like, "This is Polihale. It means house of the dead. All the kahunas say this is the exiting point for all souls on the earth." I was like, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And that makes me want to cry just thinking about it. That right there was like the single most profound validation I ever had. Because it was the most intense thing I had ever seen, and to be validated in that way, that I had in fact saw exactly what that place is. And it really was very eye-opening to like the mystical portals that are available to us, not only on Hawaii, but like the whole world, and I've seen so many since then. Like that was like the very first, like, ba-boom, like, wow, this is what this world is full of stuff, mystery that we don't even know. And so then I think it was like some months later, I found out that the Dalai Lama also recognized Polihale as being an exiting point for the souls on the planet. And, but coming back to why I even told the beginning part of that story, right, that led me there. So 12 years to the day, I had just come back to Kaua'i because I was living on Big Island, and the lava came, and we had escaped the lava by 3 days. Our house was buried 3 days after we left.
Oh, gosh.
By 60 feet of lava.
Oh, my
and
gosh.
so I had landed on Kaua'i not knowing that we were moving back here, you know what I mean? Like that I was going to live here permanently. And that New Year's, they were having a concert on the North Shore, and they never have music. It's like a big deal on Kauai. Like there's never live music here. So the whole island was going to this concert, right?
Yeah.
And so here I am, I'm at this concert. The music starts playing, and I see an entity on myself, which happens, and I probably still have some that I have yet to unbury. But anyways, I see this entity, and it's on my chest. And I remove it, and I was like, whoa, you can't be here. You gotta go. I was like, and I knew immediately it was this entity from my childhood, from a lot of violent trauma. There was a lot of fighting in my family, specifically with me and one of my siblings, where we would fight like the broomsticks and the whole deal. Like we were crazy like that. And I knew that this entity was attached to that sort of violent nature of me that wanted to fight, that I had been working on healing. And I got rid of it, and I saw this big gaping hole in my heart. And I just started healing it, and I started filling it back up with geometry and light, and I recalibrated it, remended it, and boom, my heart like is totally full. For the first time in my life, I'm thinking, my God, I was like, I've never known what it's like to have a full heart until this moment now. And I look over right in that moment, and who do I see but the billionaire walking by himself in the concert? The billionaire that I had 12 years to the day before saw handing me a check, signing a piece of paper, telling me never to talk about him. Yet here I am on a podcast telling about it, telling a story.
No names.
So, yeah. So next thing I know, I look over at my husband, and I say his name, and he's like, no, are you sure? And I was like, oh yeah, I'm sure. Next thing I know, I'm just practically running towards this man. He's like, a few hundred feet in front of me. Yeah, I'm just like going towards it. I have no idea. It's like an out of body experience. I don't even know why I'm doing this. I don't know what I'm going to do. And he like walks into this tent, and nobody's in the tent, and it's just me and him. Now, when I worked for this man, there were 3 rules. And the number 1 rule was, don't call him by his name, call him sir. Don't speak to him unless he's been spoken to you first. And don't look him in the eye. Those are the 3 rules that I had with this person. So I see him in the tent. I reach out my hand, I grab him by the shoulder, I turn him around, I look him right in his eye.
Yes.
I call him by his name. And I go, hey, I was like, my name's Jude. I used to work for you. Do you remember me? And, he's in his 80s at this point. And he had the look of fear on his face. Like he just shuddered, and he like looked over his shoulders like, oh no, I'm by myself. I don't have security. Like this woman's going to beat me up, And right then I saw, it was so interesting. Like I saw like a book. There's 2 books, and it was like all the pages of his life. And I realized that this billionaire, I don't know if anybody's ever treated him with like a sense of just like humanity, of just like, I don't want anything from you. You're just like I just want heart to heart. I just want a real conversation. Like, I don't want your money. I don't want your opportunities. I don't want anything. And I realized even his own children, everybody in his life had treated him like a paycheck, you know?
Wow.
And then I saw my life on this other book, and the pages were flipping, and I saw like, you know, all my trauma and all my wounds and all of my insecurities and all of these things. And I saw where our pages came together. And it was like sort of like the makeup of who he was and everything he dealt with, and how it directly matched all of my traumas and woundings at the time that we had met. And I'm not justifying what he did, but I can tell you I understood why he acted the way he did, and how he had a warped perception of that being right or wrong, or appropriate or inappropriate, based on the way everybody treats him in his life, you know? And then me also being hypersensitive to it, and maybe too sensitive because of the things that I had experienced in my life. And how we had come together as this like perfect storm. And so in that moment, I told him, I said, no, because I knew he thought I was going to beat him up or something. I said, no, I forgive you. I just want you to know that I forgive you. And it's all good, and I'm good, and Happy New Year. And we hugged it out.
Really?
And I left.
Gosh.
And I hugged it out, and I left, and I walked back to my husband. And I felt like $1 million. I felt like I had retrieved that like little lost girl that didn't know how to handle that situation. I took her back from him. But it was just so interesting to me, because had I not removed that entity right before I saw him, I don't know, maybe I would have slapped the guy. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't, I'm not saying that I have that tendency, but like, an entity is an entity. And it's just so interesting that like, that was the entity that I removed right before I saw him. Like, that totally could have gone a different way. Like, what if I had been triggered of that like fight or flight, or like that defensiveness? And so anyways, 12 years to the day, I cannot make it up. But that's the whole full circle story of like the whole Polihale night. And it's the story of my life. Stuff like that happens all the time. Like,
that's only one little sliver.
That's one little sliver. My life is full of it. It's almost like comical sometimes. Like, it's like a joke, like the synchronicities and the way it all lines up, and the dualistic nature of the design of things, and how it all unfolds. We
are so appreciative of you going, because both of us had heard this story before, but I think every time we tell a story, a different element pops into it, and you know, having you share the frame before and after of what occurred there as well. Like, I mean, that's absolutely huge. And what I take away, in addition to, like, there's so many levels on this, but the importance of, if you're spiritually opening and you're getting more connected, the importance of doing the inner work. So doing your healing, doing your shadow work, like really treating your own wounds. So whether you subscribe to entities, whether you believe in their existence or not, it's like whatever those darker or lower vibrational energies that we carry inside of us, like, I mean, you experience so many souls carrying their heavy energies and their experiences and their baggages. But if we can, you know, address those in the here and now, in the 3D, in our living environment, then we've less to carry forward with us, but also we're, I imagine, much better equipped to open up to, you know, things that are not of the 3D realm. So, you know, healing in any way, or, you know, the kind of inner work, the shadow work, is so important for anyone on this journey, I think.
Oh my gosh, it's everything. In fact, I don't think that there's any way to really master your own gifts without doing the work on yourself. You know, it's like everything I've ever learned is through dissecting all of these intensities that I'd gone through in this lifetime and every lifetime, and through the process of like healing that and understanding it is the only reason I know anything at all. You know, it has everything to do with just this, my whole process and my own shadow work and healing.
Honestly, thank you so much. And I just want to say to anyone that's listening, you know, that is just one taste of Jude's incredible experience and stories. And we'll definitely obviously post spirit speakers into the show notes. But where can everybody find you aside from that?
My personal website is alignshinekaua'i.com. And my Instagram is at alignshinekaua'i, which I'm sure you'll probably put a link to that somewhere.
Of
But yeah,
course.
those are definitely the two ways to find me. And then of course, Spirit Speakers Podcast. .com is where you can find the podcast. And that will also give you links to both mine and Patty's personal websites.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being with us today.
That's it for another episode.
Thank you for listening. Did you know that we are building a movement of 1 million people who are spiritual as fuck? We would love for you to join us. You can start by leaving us a review on Apple Podcast. Every month, I'm going to intuitively choose one person and do a psychic reading for you. So
Follow us on Instagram, send in your stories and topic suggestions, and join the movement
at spiritual.a.f. Until next time.
This is a Guide Your Light Network production, creating podcasts with purpose.